me get this started. Okay, guys, we're live right now. All right, so this is going to be an extension of the non sequitur show. We're going to have a conversation about some of the points and topics that were brought up in that. Chris, I'll allow you to introduce yourself first, since we always give everybody a chance to introduce. You've never been on my show, so please introduce everybody, tell them about your channel, and a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, my name's Chris Berry. It's my real name. It's also my YouTube channel name. I sometimes go by OU Chris on Discord. I've been in Flat Earth about 2 years, year and a half, 2 years. I don't know exactly. Around the summer of 17, I got into it. I came across, I don't remember if it was a YouTube suggestion or maybe I heard Eddie Bravo talk about it on Joe Rogan. And 3 months in, I did all, was in it 24/7, and then took a break a month or two, and then got back in it. And then I just couldn't, call it, personally, I'm not saying everybody, I couldn't disprove flat earth, or I couldn't prove the ball any longer. And so that was a year and a half or so ago. That's my story. I don't, I have a bachelor's degree. I don't have a master's. I don't have a PhD. I'm not, anything special. I just have done my own research. I've done some of my own tests. I'd like to do more. I wish I could have done more so far, but I have done 3, 4, 5 different tests of my own, and I have them all on my YouTube channel as well. So that's it.
Okay.
All right, great. Now, Fight the Flat Earth. I'm gonna step back to shut something off in the background that I didn't realize was on. Go ahead and introduce yourself, your channel. Everybody knows about you, but go ahead and introduce yourself, your channel, and tell everybody a little bit about tonight's debate that you had with Chris.
Hey, so yeah, I'm Fight the Flat Earth. If you don't know me, then go and subscribe to me, because if you know Team, then you probably know me by now. Tonight's debate was actually a pleasant change from a lot of the debates I've had recently. There wasn't any shouting. We were both quite respectful and nice to each other. So I really enjoyed that. Hopefully tonight, now on Team's channel, we can just clarify quickly about the Terminator line on the graphic that Team was going to show you. But gravity is a big thing that I would like to have a talk about. But I've just seen you put in the chat about the non-profit. Could you please just tell everyone watching now about the non-profit for me? Because I really like that.
Yeah, no problem. Appreciate it. It's a nonprofit called Metro Relief. It's out of the Colony, Texas. Well, that's where we do a lot of the work, but I think they're out of Dallas. I'm not sure. Anyways, it's a small nonprofit. They work with families and kids of the families who are either basically call it, homeless, not necessarily living on the streets, but one location we go to, they live in basically a hotel. It's a budget suites hotel that they rent out for them and provide them shelter. The housing. They bring food, soups and candy for the kids, and they take games. And my personal part in it all is I bring 4 or 5 guitars, and I teach guitar lessons to any of the kids interested. And no, that's about it. So if you're interested, and if you have a spare dollar, I know there's a ton of charities out there, and everybody's involved in something. It's metrorelief.org/donate.
Yeah, I'm sure Team have put the details of that in the description as well, because that sounds like
absolutely.
an excellent cause.
And you said that's local, right?
It is local. Yeah, it's in the Colony.
Okay. So I'd like to. I'll donate to that, man, just to show that I'm not a total asshole. I'll donate to that charity, because I think that's a great cause, man. So
yeah, all right. I'll donate as well. Even from the UK, I'll donate to that, because I like that.
Since we're not actually having an actual debate, I am going to be addressing super chats as they come in. Okay. Jesus says squivel. Wubba lubba lubba dub 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 lubba 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 wubba wubba dub dub dub. Thank you, Jesus. I appreciate it. All hell, Jesus is squivel.
Season 3 of Rick and Morty.
Alrighty. So yeah, we're gonna have a conversation today. We're just gonna talk a little bit about some of the points that were brought up. You had a question about gravity, right?
Chris?
Well, I guess my question to close the non-sexual was, is gravity a force or not?
Okay, and that's a great question. Because go ahead.
If I could the best description that I have of gravity is that gravity is the warping of space-time by mass, but that manifests as an accelerating force that we can measure. Right? Technically, it's not a force. It's a fictitious force because it only exists within the reference frame that we're in. So what is your problem with it being a fictitious force?
Well, I guess the way I look at it is because I keep hearing that the evidence for gravity is that it's an acceleration, therefore there has to be a force causing the acceleration. But if Einsteinian gravity isn't a force, then we can therefore even if it's not true, we can deduce that you don't need a force to cause the acceleration because Einsteinian gravity isn't a force.
Now let me explain the disparity between Einsteinian and Newtonian gravity. They both describe the same thing. Okay, they both describe this acceleration, whereas Newton described it as an accelerating force because that's what he could measure it as. Now, Newton didn't know what was causing it, and he didn't proclaim to know what was causing it. In fact, he wanted to stay as far away from that as possible because to Newton, it appeared to be an inherent property of matter that everything just attracted everything else. So as far as Newton knew, it was just an instantaneous attraction that everything had. And he came up with the law of gravitational attraction, F of G equals gm1 m2 over r squared, which accurately describes how this force interacts with everything around it. Now, Einstein came along and he said that, well, yes, it can be measured as a force, but that's not what it actually is. It's the curvature of space-time that is causing this acceleration, because it literally changes the locality of things. Now, that doesn't mean that it is not a force. Now, the main thing that Einstein said was that it was not an invisible force that manifested instantly everywhere. Einstein explained that it had a limit of the speed of light and that there was a reason behind this apparent invisible force that Newton described. And then, that is the description and understanding that he gave us of gravity. We can use Newtonian calculations for pretty much everything on a local level, but when you move into much grander scales, Einsteinian equations are the things that you need to use. But what you need to understand is that you can actually derive Newton's law of gravitational attraction from Einstein's field equations because they both describe the same thing.
You there, Chris?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, he didn't ask a question, so I don't.
So yeah, it's not a force, but it can be measured as a force because that's what it manifests as. Does that help you understand how Einstein didn't say, no, it's not a force? He didn't just disregard everything that Newton said because all of Newton's equations are actually vital parts of Einstein's equations.
Let me ask a quick question for you, Chris. This may help you understand it a little bit better about fictitious forces and how you can actually measure them. Okay, so when you're driving in your car, you do feel like when you accelerate, you do feel the backwards pull on your body, correct? You understand what I'm saying, right? Like when you're in a car and you're sitting at a stoplight, like let's say you have a glass of water, right? And you drive forward, you begin accelerating forward. If you'll notice in the glass of water, the water will still stay level, but what will happen, it'll still stay flat, I'm sorry, but what will happen is it'll actually tilt down a little bit because there's now a new vector that's pulling it in an opposite direction. Okay. The same thing you'll feel like when you're sitting in the car and you start to accelerate, you feel a backwards pull on your body.
Yeah, well, that's kind of a bad example, right? Because it's going in the opposite direction.
But hold on. Let me get through it first. We're just going through the fictitious force part right now. Okay, we'll get to gravity in 1 second. That is actually gravity that you're feeling. You're feeling this fictitious force pull you towards the back of the car. This is due to an acceleration. This force that you're feeling is an inertial force. Okay, so when you drive forward, your body, due to the law of inertia, does not want to go forward. Okay, so it requires a force to make it become non-inertial. Once it becomes non-inertial, it's accelerating. Now, if you have a frame of reference, let's say the entire car is your frame of reference, and the entire car accelerates. Now, if you're in the inside of the car with a camera, let's say we're removing everybody. All we have is a car and a ball that's hanging from the ceiling, okay? Now, all the windows are blacked out, so you can't see the outside. All you can see is the inside of the car and this ball hanging down. Now, from that picture right there, if I ask you how fast are you going, how fast are you going? You can't tell, right? Because there's no reference for you. There's only a ball hanging down. You could be going 0 miles per hour, or you could be going 10,000 miles per hour. They would both have the exact same physics. The ball would just hang there. But the moment you accelerate, the ball will look like it's going backwards, like it's being pulled backwards. Okay? Now, this is not a force that's actually pulling the ball backwards. It's just the ball wanting to stay in its inertial frame of reference. It does not want to accelerate. So from the inside of the car, it appears as if a force is pushing that ball backwards or pulling it, however you want to look at it. And you can measure that. Because the heavier an object is, the more it resists the pull. Okay? The lighter it is, the more it is going to swing freely. All right? So you can measure the force that's involved in this. And it's only measurable inside of the frame of reference, inside of an inertial frame of reference. Outside, because to the camera, let's say you were the camera and you looked and that ball immediately swung backwards like a pendulum. It kind of pointed back. That would make no sense to you, right? I mean, you would have to know at some point something's acting on that ball, because normally the ball hangs down. That's what a fictitious force is. It is nothing. It's not a real force outside of the reference frame. You look down, let's say you're outside of the car, you understand the car's accelerating, the ball's just trying to remain in its place. But inside the car, it looks like something's pushing that ball backwards. And if you were to put a scale on that ball, let's say, the moment that you accelerated forward, let's say you accelerated forward at 10 meters per second, 9.8, whatever you want to call it. We'll call it 10 for this discussion to make things easy. Let's say you're accelerating forward at 10 meters per second. Well, on that back, the force measured will be the mass of the ball times the acceleration of the car. That is the fictitious force. Inside of the frame of reference, you can measure it. Outside of the frame of reference, it makes no sense whatsoever. It's just the natural law of inertia that we see everywhere we look. Now that is the fictitious force explained and how we can measure something that's not really there. Now gravity as a fictitious force, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen in a second so that people can see this explanation. Well, it's going to take me a second to get to that. I'll share my screen in a second, but let me explain what gravity is as a fictitious force, okay? Now, inside of our frame of reference, gravity is a real force, just like we can measure the force of the ball pushing back on the weight in that frame of reference. In our frame of reference, gravity is a real force. Outside of the frame of reference that we're in, what's actually going on, what Einstein said, is that all of us are standstill. We're all standing still, traveling along our geodesic at a constant rate. Okay, so when you're in free fall, there's nothing stopping you from moving your geodesic. That's why you don't feel like you're accelerating, because you're just moving along your path, your line. Gravity's still there. The curvature of space-time is still there. But you also have an inertial force that's now present, trying to keep you from accelerating. So these two forces counteract each other, and so it feels as if you have no accelerating force whatsoever. This is how you make sense of things like free fall. This is how you make sense of things that are in a non-inertial frame of references when you're taking the measurement from a frame of reference within that non-inertial frame of reference. Does that help you at all?
Kind of.
Okay. And I'm gonna actually be a little bit more. I just needed time to get the paint up so I could actually share this with you. Give me 1 second. All right, almost there, guys. And this is also the equivalence principle. So you have to be able to explain things in both manners. You have to be able to explain things as if you're falling to the earth, and you have to be able to explain things as if the earth is racing towards you. All right.
And that's one of the things that Einstein did. He described it as everything is stationary, and
Okay.
other things are moving to, like Team described it to me the other day. You've got someone standing on the North Pole and the South Pole, and they both drop an apple. Well, those apples are technically stationary, and the Earth at both points is accelerating towards the apple.
Yes, it's a hard
Yeah,
concept
I
to
mean that.
understand, but
Yeah.
it
Well,
is actually what's going on. When you take everything we see in reality, this is how things are measured out. Now, give me 1 second. I'm about to I'm just setting up the screen so that people in the chat can see it. Okay, so you guys can see my screen on in the Hangout, correct?
Oh wait, I'm not on the Hangout.
Chris, can you see the screen on the Hangout?
yes,
Okay, so
Microsoft Paint.
yeah, Microsoft Paint, correct. So let's say we're going to take two different scenarios, okay? We're going to take a scenario where there's a top up here, and this is a weight, okay? Or this is a scale, I'm sorry. And it's hanging down, and there's a ball right here, okay? On both things. Now, in Einstein's, the way Newton looks at it, there's a force pulling this down, okay? The way Newton looks at it is there are no forces pulling it down. There's only
You mean Einstein?
I mean Einstein. There's only the ground trying to rush up, because this thing always this object right here in Einstein's thing, it always wants to be inertial. It never wants to be accelerating from it because it looks at it from its own frame of reference. So when it drops, let's say we cut this, right? Well, this doesn't really drop. What this does is it stays in place and the floor rushes up. This rushes away. So how do you explain what you feel? Like, why is there a gravitational force? Why is there a force felt here at the weight? Well, the force is felt here because as this thing is wanting to stay in its place, this little line right here is pulling it up, creating the inertial force right here. So what's being felt up here is actually a desire for this to remain in place while this point is pulling it away. All right. So if on the other side, you look at it and you say it like this. There's a force from Newton's perspective. There's a force pulling it towards the earth. The force is being felt on the line and then on the weight. All this is countering the force. This is why it doesn't fall, because these forces, the forces up here are holding it up, are countering it. When in reality, it's really those forces are countering the inertial force, the desire for the object to remain on its geodesic, which it's not happening because it's being pulled away from it's being pulled away from its geodesic. That's the inertial force you're feeling. So it is a fictitious force when looking at it from Einstein's perspective. But the force, because this force right here is equal to this force over here, it doesn't matter. You can measure it either way. It's going to give you the exact same measurements whether the force is real, as in Newtonian mechanics, or fake, fictitious, in Einsteinian mechanics. That's what fictitious forces are. They explain the inertial force, the desire for you to remain in constant motion in a constant direction. Any change in that is going to result in a force that is felt on that object in its inertial frame, and that force can be measured with accuracy. Can I close Paint?
Yeah, I think so.
Chris, are you good with that?
Yeah, I guess I have a question.
Yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So we've all seen those density gradient canisters with, like, it's got water, oil, vinegar, whatever the hell is in there, creating the different layers. So, and then I'm sure we've all also seen the video of it falling in the whatever it's called, hyperbolic plane.
Yeah.
And it mixes. Let me ask you, I'm just sort of getting to the real question, but let me ask you, starting out, why does it mix?
Yes, let me answer that in 1 second. Let me address a super chat, 50 Aussie dollars from our favorite Australia, or one of our favorite Australians. We got so many of them, dude. You're my favorite Aussie. Aussie Globehead, Shillbot loves gravity. Yes, Shillbot does. Thank you so much, sir. I appreciate that. Now your question was about the density column, correct? And I really enjoy this conversation right here because the density column is actually evidence that you do have an accelerating force that is present. Okay, so
Wait. But we
okay,
just agreed that there is no accelerating force. It's
it there. Well,
an
no,
inertial two frames of reference, one going down and or one going up.
right, but it's still going to no. The inertial frame of reference is still going to be pulling you down in Einstein's proposal because you're trying to leave that area. You're accelerating away from where you want to be. That's the force you're feeling is the acceleration away from your inertial
Do you have your
frame.
drawing? Do you still have your drawing, or did you close it?
I closed it, but I can pull it up.
But on the right side, you had it standing still, and the earth or the ground moving up towards it, right?
Right. So when you're
So
not
you
in free
wouldn't have
fall,
the same effect.
okay, so let's keep in mind when you're not in free fall, right? You're feeling gravity when you're not in free fall, and that's because according to Einstein, you're actually being pulled away from your geodesic, creating an inertial force. That inertial force is the fictitious force that we label as gravity. The same way that you accelerate in your car, you feel an acceleration back, is because you're being pulled away from where you want to be because according to the first law of motion, you want to be traveling in a straight line at a constant velocity, and any deviation from that straight line at a constant velocity will result in a force felt. It's going to require a force to do that. So whether you're looking at it from Newton's point of view, where you're actually stationary, but the ground is pulling you down, and you're feeling that attempt to pull you off of your geodesic, or you're looking at it from Einstein's perspective, where you want to be on your geodesic, but the Earth or whatever you're attached to in that thing, let's say an elevator, is pulling you away from the floor. So that inertial force that you feel is fictitious, and we label that as gravity.
So let me ask you a follow-up question. So if it's falling, if it's in free fall, it mixes because of, is it mixed because of the force of gravity pulling on it?
No.
Well, it mixes because the vector that is causing the density to go into that layer isn't there anymore.
Yeah. So, okay, it's a good question actually that you're asking. So, first off, you have to understand fluid mechanics. Everything's moving inside of a fluid. You understand that, right? I mean, that's the basic why things mix. That we're going to say why things mix, okay? When you drop it in free fall, you have the force of gravity pulling it down, okay? And then you have the fictitious force pulling it up. This is the inertial force. We're talking about Newtonian mechanics here, because to try to explain that using Einstein would be a little bit more difficult, but we've already shown we're going to come to the same answer. So in Newtonian mechanics, let's assume there's a vector pulling it down. This is the real force of gravity in this case. When it begins to free fall, you have the opposite and equal force, the inertial force, pulling in the opposite direction. It wants to make everything stay where it was at, but now it's accelerating down. So you have these two forces that contradict each other, and what's felt on the liquid is no force. It's a zero force. There's gravity pulling down, there's inertial force pulling up. They cancel it out, and they mix. They mix due to the internal motion at that point. If they weren't liquid, they wouldn't just, particles of board, for instance, next to wood, wouldn't just start mixing together because it's in free fall.
Wait a second.
Yeah.
Let me stop you. So you're saying as it's falling, there's also a force pushing up on it?
Yes.
And that force is what?
The inertial force.
So
that's
does
the
inertial force?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Does the inertial force not counteract the gravitational force?
No, that it does counteract the gravitational force, which is why you read a 0 on an accelerometer if you drop it. Are you familiar with that test?
I thought if you dropped an accelerometer, it would detect it falling.
No, it will not detect it falling. Well, okay, hold on. It detects it falling, but I'm talking about let's say if you have a accelerometer and you hold it in your hands, it reads 9.8 meters per second down. We're just going to use one axis on an accelerometer at this point. We'll say the axis that goes from the bottom of the phone to the earth. Okay.
If you hold it in your hand, it will say 9.8 meters per second.
Yes.
But it's not moving at 9.8 meters per second, right?
Right.
No. But there is still an accelerating force of 9.8 meters per second squared acting on it.
Now, also,
and that's what it's registering. So,
Okay, but so that's a good segue.
when you drop it, it is accelerating at 9.8 meters per second squared. So it will register 0 because the force that it's feeling is then being countered by the inertial force of it dropping.
Yeah, accelerating towards the Earth.
Yeah.
So let me ask you a question.
Mm-hmm.
Following on that, if is the density container falling and it mixes, why is it not mixing when it's sitting still on a table?
Okay, that's a great question, because at that point you're no longer dealing with the inertial force going in the opposite direction, right? Because you're no longer accelerating. You're now there, and you're sitting on the table. So you have a gravitational acceleration that's pulling down. Now each one of those layers, and we're going to say that the layers are consistent all the way through, okay? So that we're not seeing any variations in densities or anything in each of the layers. Just the densities between the layers, not inside the layers. So when gravity's pulling down, and again, we're talking about fluids, so they can mix, all right? When gravity's pulling down, it's going to pull down on a fluid with greater force than it will a fluid with a more dense fluid with greater force than it will a less dense fluid, okay? Now, if you think of tug of war, all right, they're both tugging at that same spot. They both want to get in that same lowest energy level spot. They want to get as close to the Earth as possible. But one wants to get there harder than the other one does. Now, it doesn't mean that the force is not pulling on it, because as we can see in the density tower, the most dense is at the bottom, the second most dense is next to it, and then there's even layers and layers and layers of less and less dense going all the way up. Now, this is because the force that's pulling down on them, the force that they generate due to Newton's second law, F equals ma, is less than the force that was generated by the denser fluids at the bottom.
Well, so do you, and maybe and again, I'm not saying I'm even right. I am trying to honestly understand. So you have to realize it's hard for me to understand when you say that the force of gravity is causing it to accelerate and causing the liquids to mix, but then when it's sitting on the table, the same force of gravity is there pulling on it, but the liquids don't mix.
Right. Okay. So let me explain it to you like this. You can put a tennis ball in your hand and extend your hand out and just hold the tennis ball there, right?
Sure.
Okay. If that tennis ball weighed 40 pounds, let's say I replace the tennis ball with a 40-pound weight, could you do the same thing?
I could. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, yeah. Well, okay. But you see what I'm saying, right? You see what I'm saying, right? Yeah. So they're both occupy the exact same volume, but one has more mass in it. One is more dense. And that one that has more dense is going to be pulled harder to the Earth. Even though they're accelerating at the same rate, it's going to be pulled harder to the Earth. Now, you're holding it in your hand. It's not actually accelerating, right? I mean, it's not accelerating, but you still feel the force, and that's because the acceleration is still there, but it's not there because of the object accelerating. It's there because of the accelerating force that's present.
Well, right. So, okay. Well, I don't know if that answered my specific question because, well, that's just a completely different scenario. You're talking about solids versus liquids, but the liquid in the density tower mixes when it's in free fall due to the acceleration due to gravity pulling on it, pulling it down towards the Earth. But then when it's on the table with that same pulling force, it doesn't mix. I just can't wrap my head around that.
Okay. Well, again, think about when you're driving in your car and you feel that force pulling back. Okay. When you're falling down, you feel that same force pulling up. But the reason why you don't actually feel that force is because you're being pulled up and you're being pulled down at the exact same acceleration, and your mass doesn't change, it stays the same. So now we're just dealing with the accelerations. So let's say you were to take the density column, okay? Let's say you turn that density column upside down and you stuck it to the ceiling as you're in free fall. And let's say you also have a couple of rockets on the top of your free fall elevator, and they begin accelerating you down, so that now instead of traveling at 10 meters per second due to gravity, you're now traveling at 11 meters per second, okay? So what would happen? Well, if we look up at the density tower, you'll notice that all the denser materials are now at the top because of the inertial force from the 11 meters per second acceleration down, which is also 11 meters per second up, is going to be stronger than the 9.8, or we'll say 10, than the 10 meters per second pulling down by gravity. Now, when you add these two vectors up, you will see that 1 meter per second is what the net vector is in the upwards direction, and that would be what you would see in the density tower. And you know this, and I'll tell you how you know this, because you know that you can take a bucket of water and spin it, and the bucket of water will be at the top. It'll appear as if all the water is still going in the opposite direction. It's because you're generating a force that's greater than that of gravity. If you spin that bucket to where there's less than 9.8 meters per second squared, when it gets to the top, all the water will fall down on you, and so will the bucket. But you spin it fast enough, and if you spin it so that it's a perfect 10 meters per second, then the water at the top will feel like it has no net force on it at all. But if you spin it at 11 meters per second, when the water gets to the top, it'll have a 1 meter per second. You can measure the force on it, on anything on the inside. The acceleration on the mass will be at 1 meter per second, because it's 1 meter per second, or it's 11 in one direction and it's 10 in the other, in the exact other.
So I'm gonna have to go in probably about 10 minutes, team, because I am struggling to stay awake.
Well, hey, how about this? I'll turn it over to you so you can finish off for a second before you have to get off. Chris, you're welcome to stay, and we can continue having the conversation as much as you'd like.
Okay, I'll probably have to go. I'm pretty tired too, and I'm probably not going to be the best guest right now either. But I can stay on for the next 10 if Craig is.
Okay, let me ask you a question. Is it okay if I grab your email address from you and set up a future debate? We have a few people that would like to debate flat earthers. Completely science, not we're not. I don't do the whole yelling shit on my channel. As long as you're respectful, they'll be respectful too.
Yeah, I will. It is hard for me to join because my wife is usually here and my kids are here and they're out of town
Sure.
for the day. So I kind of actually had the opportunity for once. I usually don't. But I'll definitely give it to you. And if I can join, I will. But
we'll try to set something up in the future, because I have a lot of people that you seem to be somebody who, I'm not saying you're believing me, but I think that you're actually trying to think about what I'm saying intuitively, which makes a big difference, because you can't just discount what I'm saying by saying no, it's not, that's not it. No, these actually are things that you can test on Earth. So everything I say. But anyway, fight the flat Earth. Let me turn it over to you two guys. Let y'all talk for a second, and I'll just step out because y'all have been patient enough.
So, do you have any other questions around gravity, Chris?
No, I just the big one for me, and maybe there's a test or an experiment I can do with the density tower, but I just don't understand. So, like for example, if going back to the accelerometer, if it's in your hand and it's saying 9.8, standing, quote unquote, standing still because there's a constant force, but the density tower isn't expressing that force when it's on the ground. And then what happens if you actually let the accelerometer fall? Does it still say 9.8, or is it going to go up?
Well, no, it registers 0.
Yes, it registers 0.
Registers 0 if you drop it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Because the net force on it is what it's expressing is 0 of a net force, because of what's pulling down and pushing up is the same.
Okay,
and
I'll have to look into that more.
The reason why the density tower maintains that density tower because of gravity, because there is a vector pulling the things down, so that makes them order themselves based on the density. So that's why the more dense at the bottom and it sits on top of itself. That what's actually causing the density tower to sit there is the fact that there's an accelerating force. If there wasn't that force, then there's no reason for the density to order itself.
Okay, I need to look into that thing, because that's not something I was aware of, as far as if something's accelerating, it also has an equal upward force.
Yeah, because of the way that Einstein, that's what Tim was trying to explain, is the way that Einstein explained it. Obviously, if you're looking at it from purely Newtonian perspective, then you would say that as it's falling, it's feeling the accelerating force of 9.8 meters per second, and that's why it's accelerating, because something's pushing it down. But Einstein describes it as the Earth trying to move up towards it, and the object wants to try and stay still.
Hey, I got to go on mute for just a second. My wife's calling.
Yeah, no problem. While he's on mute, I'm gonna go ahead and pull up that picture from earlier so I can explain that. I think I'm giving not the greatest explanation of that picture that I that you showed. Let me
The Terminator Light one.
Yeah. I want to explain that, at least for the audience, so that way they can understand what I was trying to point out here.
Excuse me.
Okay.
Man, the sun is actually fully up here.
Oh man, I'm sorry. Fight.
Yeah, that's cool.
I just wanted to get these. I wanted to get these concepts out before we.
Yeah. If you're in the chat right now, team recently added a new emoji. I'm going to put a whole bunch of them in right now, and if you want to become a channel member, then you will be able to post Team Skeptic in a mankini. One of the mods kindly posted the link to become a channel member, so other people can post you in a mankini. Because I feel like that's mandatory at this point.
Okay, hold on 1 second, and I will get this screen shared to you guys, and then once I have it set up right on the thing, I can show you. God dog it, where's that? It just changed everything. All right, let me. Okay. You guys should be able to see my screen. Let me make sure that the audience can see it too.
Where is it?
Well, it's not being shared on the.
No, I was trying to find Hangouts in my tabs.
Oh.
I'm so high IQ. I've got like a bunch of tabs open.
Oh, great! Now it's not even showing on the thing on the screen out there. Okay, I'll just share the Hangout screen. That's not a problem. All right. So anyway, the Terminator line. What the Terminator line is the line at which you would see the sun on the horizon. Okay. Sunlight, twilight, for instance, goes beyond the horizon line, but that's not. It's not expressing on the Earth where the sunlight stops getting. What the twilight is expressing is where you're still seeing the light coming over the top of the Earth, but it's not hitting the ground. It's actually just illuminating the sky.
Yeah.
Let me see something. And this is not sharing it. Oh, it's too late, guys. It's too late.
Yeah, it is late. And I'll tell you what, I'm gonna have to go now because I am really struggling to stay awake.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'll finish this describing what's going on in that picture.
Yeah.
And I'll get it up for you guys. Hold on 1 second.
If Chris comes back, tell him I said thanks for the decent conversation, and I'll be in contact with him.
Yeah, I will do.
And I'll give you a shout tomorrow, dude.
Yep. Take it easy, brother.
All right. Bye.
Okay. So now I'm getting.
Good night, everyone.
Trying to share that application. Okay, so for some reason it's not letting me share my paint anymore. All right. Give me 1 second, guys. Getting this open up, and I want to give this explanation to him and see if he understands it a little bit better. All right, Chris, are you there? You still away? Oh, I know how to do it. Okay. Give me 1 second, guys. I'm about to share it with you guys first. All right. And I'll wait for Chris to get back here to go into full detail, but okay. So the Terminator line here is the green line that crosses the Earth. This is an absolute fact. We've been measuring it since ancient times because a lot of monuments are built around this fact that on the equinox, the sun comes in at a perfect 90 degrees to the north-south longitudinal lines. So if atmospheric refraction, you can give any excuse in the world as to why you see a sunset, but that excuse has to apply everywhere. So an observer at A would see a sunrise for the same reason that an observer at B would see a sunrise, but that would also be the reason why everybody on the black line should see a sunrise. There is no difference. The refraction and all that, it's all the same. You don't have a reason for seeing the sunset at the top of the map or at the bottom of the map, or sunrise at the bottom of the map. You can't say that's due to refraction, because then the refraction along that angle would be much, much higher than the refraction just 10 degrees away from that. So we'll wait till Chris comes on. We'll talk to him and let him get a proper goodbye. Explain this a little bit better than it was explained on OnSec. Hey, yo, Chris, you there? All right, guys. I guess he's away for a second. Okay, so I guess we'll give him a few minutes. I know it's getting kind of late for him, but yeah, Metal Jacket. It's the Terminator line is something you can't deny. If you deny the Terminator line, then you're just outright denying reality. In fact, most flat earthers that put out material and consider themselves authorities in the flat earth, they all accept the fact that the Terminator line, it exists. I mean, you have to explain as to why the sun can make a perfect straight line shadow on 2 equinoxes a year, but it doesn't do it any other time of the year. Every other time it forms a circular or, let's see. Yeah, cat booper, exactly. The moon would be a good representation of the Terminator line being a clear, defined line. All right, so if he doesn't come back in a second, we'll go ahead and end it because I don't want to sit around here unless you guys have anything. Here, I'll address some super chats that came in. Hold on one second. Get back up to it. Oh man, I love those mankinis. Everybody in the crowd, if you're Ding Force, go ahead and light the mankinis up. Blind people with that. All right. And now it's not showing me my super chats. Great. All right, so super chats that came in after Aussie Globehead. We have Space Comma $2 testing once again to make sure Vista works. I think it works, Space Comma. Feel free to test as much as you'd like, but I'm pretty sure it works from my perspective at least. Andrew Crook, Andrew Crook, New Zealand $2. No message, but thank you, sir. I do appreciate you very much. Blair Sadowitz, I found us a textbook, Flat Earth, the history of an infamous idea. Oh, wow. That's is that a real book, Blair? If that's a real book, I would love to see that book. Brian Shannon, $5. Basically comes down to just moving versus moving at different speeds, acceleration, then boom, Einstein. Yeah, it's, to be honest with you, when you start thinking about it in the general relativistic ways, it's hard to wrap your head around, because literally, according to Einstein, he says that if 2 people are outside of the Earth, right? And Newton says that if they're falling towards the Earth, that's what's happening. They're actually accelerating towards the Earth. That's what makes sense to our reality. That's intuition to us. It's very intuitive. Einstein comes around and goes, no. It's not that each one of the guys are falling to the Earth. It's that the Earth is accelerating towards both of those people. Now, intuitively, you say, I can't. No, that's not what's happening. They're falling to the Earth. I see them. They're falling. But no, that is incorrect. According to Einstein, which has a more predictive power, according to his model, we are stationary. The Earth's surface is rushing to us. It's crazy. $9.99 from Globetard G. Thank you very much. So there's no message. I would love to know how globetarded I am. All right. Well, Mr. Barry, are you back yet? All right. Well, unfortunately, he's not around. What I'm going to do is I'm going to shut this down. He didn't have much time anyway, so I appreciate it. I'll stick around and wait for him to come back on, but I'm going to go ahead and shut the Hangout down right now, and we'll see you guys later. I believe we're going to be doing a live show on Fight the Flat Earth's channel tomorrow. We're going to finish off our destruction of Nathan Thompson, and then we'll get to JM Truth after that. But give me 1 second. I believe a late super chat came in. Aussie Globehead. Come on, man. You're embarrassing me, bro. You're making me feel. You're tingling me. My dinger's getting bigger. Okay. I'm a straight dude, and at this point, I'm really hoping you're a chick, because you raised my dinger ever so slightly. Shillbot made me do it with a bunch of mankinis. See, Globehead knows how to do it, okay, with the mankinis. You guys don't understand. That's requested by y'all. I didn't want that. Who wants to see their avatar in a mankini walking around? Nobody does. But you know what? You guys wanted it. You get it. Now abuse it. Everybody throw that mankini in there and blind any flat earther that may come in and watch this show with that awesomeness. All right. So, Chris, are you there yet, man? Come on now. We're waiting on you.
Hey, I actually just got back.
Okay, good deal. I didn't want to shut it down without you actually being here, because I just, give you a little bit of respect here. So,
no worries.
Do you have any other questions or anything else you'd like to talk about? Oh, hey, I have do you mind me explaining that refraction picture that Fight the Flat Earth brought up, so you can maybe refute that later?
Sure.
Okay. Give me 1 second. Let me make sure that it's still being shown to the audience.
Okay.
All right. All right. So, can you see the refraction picture on your screen? I should still be sharing it.
No.
Okay. Let me get that to you real quick. Hold on. It's so weird. It will not let me share that. Hold on. Let me pull it up real quick.
By the way, I am going to convert to the ball just for the super chats. You guys get some serious super chats going on.
I'm going to be honest with you, man. These guys humble me beyond. There's nothing I can even say. I'm just beyond humbled by this, and it's not a reason to be a globe earther for any amount. I mean, if the Earth is flat and that's truly what you believe, you should stick with your beliefs. But you should always allow your belief system to be self-checked. So if you believe something that's wrong, you should change because you understand that what you believed previously to be wrong, not because of some outside influence. Because that's not what I do it for. Oh yeah, I know. I'm sorry. Okay, give me a second. You can see my screen now, right? Let me pull that graphic back up. Okay, can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. So let me just double check to make sure that the Hangout's seeing. Oh yeah, the people in the chat are also seeing it. Okay, great. All right, so what is going on here? All right. So the green line is what's called the terminator line. This is where the sunlight stops on the Earth's surface. Okay. It's not this is observational fact, and I was saying this while you were gone. Most of the flat Earth community that is trying to actually prove that the Earth is flat, they have to accept this observational reality. At twice a year on the equinox, the terminator line appears to make a straight line from top to bottom on the flat Earth. All right, and we're just going to assume the flat Earth model for the time being. Okay, so you say or I tell you that everybody sees the sun on the horizon, and now we're going to use observation point A. All right, let's say you're standing at observation point A. Why do you see the sunlight on the horizon that's X kilometers away?
Well, wait, I'm confused because based on this, you wouldn't because you're on the other side of
Well,
the
no.
line.
Point A. We'll say point A is where the end of the line meets the green line. The black line and the green line intersect. That's what that really represents. Same with point B. It represents where the black and green
Oh,
line intersect on the
oh,
north
okay.
of the North Pole.
Sorry. Well, then ask the question again.
Why, if the sun is in the sky, why would the observer at A see the sun on the horizon?
If the sun is in the sky, why would the observer A see the sun in the horizon?
Yeah. So
Um,
you see the yellow dot, right? The yellow
Right.
dot. Okay, that represents the sun over the equator, and this is solar noon. Okay, at this point. Now every point along that green line sees the sun on the horizon at this time. Now,
Okay.
if you're above the North Pole, that's your sunset. If you're below the North Pole, that's your sunrise. Now, why is it that any observer sees the sun on the horizon at sunset?
That any observer or the B observer?
Yeah, no, any observer. I'm saying in reality, at any point in time, why does an observer see the sun on the horizon at sunset?
Well, my my understanding is well, it's just twofold. It's perspective bringing the sun towards the horizon, and then
Okay.
it's refraction bending the sun around. I can't say around it and not around the curve, but bringing the
Right.
sun down.
Okay, so I'll give you those two explanations, all right? And then I'll say no matter what other explanation you want to throw on, I'll give you that as well. So if you come up later and go, oh, yeah, this, and also don't forget this, I'm going to say that, yes, I'll agree with you for the sake of this model and this explanation. Now, the subsolar point is the point on Earth at which the sun appears to be directly above. So when we're talking in kilometers here, we're going to be talking about land distances to the subsolar point. Okay, so the atmosphere that surrounds that sun is generally the same. Okay, there's no major differences in the atmosphere around in the immediate vicinity of around the sun. And if you're saying that those atmospheric conditions is what causes that an observer at point A to see the sun on the horizon, then what I'm telling you is that anybody along that thick black line will also see the sun on the horizon due to the exact same reasons that you said. So let's say if you're looking at Central Australia, where that, or North Central Australia, whatever, where that where the thick line intersects, well, they should be seeing a sunset for the same reason that observer at A and the same reason that observer at B is seeing a sunset.
Uh-huh.
Now, if you look at the top of that map where the green line is at the top, well, they're also seeing a sunset. How is that possible? What special needs are what special refraction or properties is going to make everybody in that direction, including the people on the black line, not see the sun on the horizon? And why is this consistent daily?
So I mean, I don't want. I'm not trying to sneak out of it, but I don't. Most of the research I do is not towards the sky.
Right.
It's my personal preference is to stick with what I don't call land or sea observations, like things like laser tests or video tests of seeing something 50 kilometers away, those kind of things. I mean, again, I'm not trying to give you a cop out answer, but I just don't have near enough information to know,
Right.
is what you're saying even correct? Do all the angles match up? Is that Terminator line actually true from top to bottom? Is what you just said even true? Does that person at the top of the green see a sunset?
Yes.
Or is it a gradation? Right, it's a gradation of light at that point, so you wouldn't see the sun. Like you can see in the sunset when the sun's already gone, call it either over the horizon or beyond the horizon. You can still see the sunlight, right? And so there's
Right.
some light scattered at your point, even though you don't technically see the sun. So
Yeah, well, what I'm saying is that if you apply any explanation to as why you can see that person, or why the person at A can see the sunlight, then that explanation would work for any person along that thick black line, because it's all being refracted by, it's all making the sun appear. It's all taking light and doing crazy things with light to make it appear to be on the horizon. But then again, it's doing that in all directions as well. Light doesn't just go in one direction. And it doesn't know that it needs to go further in another direction than it does in the other one, because that's where the terminator line is. Now, the terminator line is something that you can, you can do your research on it, but it's an absolute fact. It's been predicted through the ancients. You can look at Stonehenge, Machu Picchu, the temples in, I believe, Manila. They also account for the sunrise and sunset, or sunrise on the equinox. It's because on that day, that represents when days are getting longer and nights are getting shorter, or nights are getting longer and days are getting shorter. In the ancient times, they needed to know this so they could prepare for winter. So they knew that at some point in the year, actually twice in the year, they would have this opportunity to measure this, and they would know precisely that the seasons were about to change. And that's what the equinox represents to the ancient people. Now, since then, we've had the ability to understand and explain the equinox. And if you're a globe, if the Earth's a globe and the sun's much larger, then it would make sense that only half of the Earth is covered in sunlight. So at 2 points in the orbit, the tilt is directly 90 degrees towards the subsolar point. And this is why you can look east on the sunrise. Every observer on Earth can see the sunrise east, and every observer on Earth can see the sunset west on the equinoxes. There's no other way to explain this.
Right. And again, I don't even want to attempt, because I just don't have enough knowledge. It's not the primary point of where my research has been. So for example, do you know who the rumpus is?
Yeah.
Okay, so the rumpus, so where I like to focus in my sort of just personal preference on sort of proving the shape of Earth is, rumpus. The rumpus admits and says that there are observations that are too far to be seen around the, quote unquote, on a curve, if you're just talking about pure geometry.
Right.
Anthony Riley, aka Sleeping Warrior, has an observation from, I think it's 50 kilometers. It might be 45. Either way, it's an insanely long distance. It's like 25 or 30-mile distance that rumpus says is a true distance, and you can see from top to the bottom. Mm-hmm. What he does, though, is he says, but what he calls it is super looming. See, so he has to explain that observation away with a refraction answer that he calls super looming. So again, I'm like, okay, well, I'm not disputing that right now. I'm just saying I like to stick to those and say, well, is that true? Is that even possible? What kind of, refractive index do you have to have something super loom 31 miles away? Those kind of questions.
And that's the other problem, is that if you look at these observations by Sleeping Warrior and a few of the other people, if they're trying to say this is proof of a flat Earth, then they need to actually submit the accompanying data. Okay, I can't just say, I see this, therefore it's flat, because that doesn't make sense. That's looking through your eye, not your eye of analysis. And I'll forever say this moving forward. We need to look at the world not through our eyes, but through our eyes of analysis. So we ask ourselves, is this only possible on a flat Earth? Now, how can we determine that? Well, we can easily determine it. All they have to do is, if they see something that's being measured too far, is take the proper scientific measurements that accompany it, the control measurements, things so that we can develop what the refractive index is, so we can say for sure that this piece of evidence is exclusive to the flat Earth. That's the only thing we're missing for the flat Earth is, well, two things that we're missing for the flat Earth. One is a working model, and two is an exclusive piece of evidence that cannot be explained away by the Earth being a globe. Now, if you ask me to explain the superlooming, I don't know. I would have to actually see their hangout or whatever to be able to address that properly. But
sure.
Even if I said, okay, superlooming, whatever, this is the reason that we're seeing the sun. Like, there's all these refractive reasons for seeing the sun here. All those reasons would still work for everybody that's inside of that circle, because it's the sun that's illuminate, that's sending the light out. Like the refractive index around the sun is what's is going to be what gets it to start bending and heading down towards the earth and all this and that you have to have for this observation to be consistent with reality. But then again, at the same time, it would be consistent at every point on the circle. And so the Terminator line would never be a straight line. It would always be a circle that just followed the sun all the way around. On days when it was more heavily refracted, the circle might be a little bit bigger or smaller. And days when it's less, it might be bigger or smaller that day too. But it doesn't matter. It's be consistent all the way around the world. And it would be in a circle because that's how light propagates.
Fair enough.
Sorry, I muted just to give you a chance to answer. Now, do you have any other questions? Or I know it's getting late. I was about to say, I know it's getting late for you, man. Are you satisfied right now with what our conversation? Maybe we can pick this up at a later date and time.
Yeah, sure. And again, I mean, during the non-sex show, I saw people saying I was a Poe and Poe this and Poe that. And I mean, look, I like to ask questions. One of my big pet peeves is people making claims without, evidence. And I mean, I'm sure, and maybe I did it a couple times. I'm not saying I didn't, but when I ask questions or I say, well, how do you know, or what's the evidence for that claim? I'm not being a Poe, right? I'm legitimately trying to understand, why that claim was made and what evidence there is to support it. So see, now you gave me something to think about, to be honest, about gravity, because I didn't know that as something falls in acceleration, there's an upward vector force or inertial force or whatever. So now I'm going to have to look into that and see what that means. So no, I'm not a Poe, and I believe the Earth is flat. That's the other thing I hate when people say, well, there's no flat earthers. They're just in it for money, or they're lying or something. Like, I'm not lying. I think the Earth is flat. Does that mean it is and I'm right? No. But that is my belief based on the research I've done. So
now, can I ask you a question? Do you accept that your belief could be fallible?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Hey, perfect. Then we can have a conversation. If you don't believe, if you're coming from an unfalsifiable belief system, in other words, let's say I give you a perfectly explainable explanation and you say, well, God said differently. There's no way. Yes, if that's the position you're coming from, then there's no arguing with you. I just have to leave you alone and say, hey, have a nice day, blah, blah, blah. But if you're coming from a point where you can say, because my belief system is fallible, okay, everything I believe it based on evidence. So if there's enough evidence to support a contrary opinion that makes my opinion or my belief appear to be extremely wrong, then the most likely scenario is going to be I'm going to start believing in that because there's evidence to support that. There's more evidence to support this model or this explanation. I'm going to believe that other than this. If you're coming from that type of position, then you're workable. Then we can have a conversation. You can convince me. I'll give you every opportunity to convince me. It's not going to happen because you'd have to explain certain things away. And I'm only saying it's not going to happen, not because I'm saying my belief system's infallible, but I'm saying because I've done enough research in this and I understand the science behind it that you would have to explain certain things without, non-scientifically and try to make them scientific in nature. And it would be really hard to convince me otherwise. Right. One is the accelerometer. And let me give you two tests before you get out of here. I want to give you two things you can do for yourself at home that may help you see what's actually going on in reality. Okay, the first thing that I want you to do, I want you to get a phone. Yeah, I'm sure you have a smartphone. Go download an accelerometer and make sure you have a screen record function. Okay. I want you to take the accelerometer or your phone and go to your bed. Drop it about 6 feet off of your bed. It'll hit your bed. Now, during the time that it's in free fall, what you'll notice is when you're holding it up, there's a 9.8 meter per second squared force pulling it down. It's registering an acceleration down. When you drop it, you will notice that the acceleration will go up to 0 and will level out at 0 until it stops accelerating. So that's the first thing that needs to open your mind as to what's really going on there. Go look it up, see what's going on, and then you'll have an understanding of what the mechanics of reality is for accelerometers. Now the second thing you can do is this one's easy. Get a camera and videotape yourself doing this. Go stand on the bed that you were on with a bottle of water and a straw. Okay. Now, we all know that this is reality. You blow bubbles into water, the bubbles rise, correct? Okay. When you jump off, blow the bubbles in the bottle, and jump off your bed as you're blowing the bubbles in. All right. Now, as you're falling to the ground, you will notice that the bubbles do not fall. That the bubbles remain stationary inside of the bottle. This tells you that they're all falling at the same rate, 9.8 meters per second squared.
Right. What would the acceleration be on the X or Z axis? Or I mean, Y or Z?
Okay. So your phone has a 3-axis or 6-axis not gyroscope, but accelerometer in there. And what that does is look at your phone. The screen, if you're looking at your phone flat, the screen is XY, and then the depth of your phone is the Z axis. So you'll get 3. You'll get like a one going forward, one going right, and one going forward back, one going left right, and one going top down. So the easiest way to do this is to typically take your phone and set it down in one orientation where you feel like you can keep that orientation all the way through the fall. You'll see some variations, but you'll be able to see where the variations are in the tilt of the phone as it falls, things like that. But you'll get a general idea that accelerating vector goes away while it's in free fall acceleration.
Right. So, oh man, I need to jump off, but I mean, we keep hitting points, so I'm like, again, I feel like this is sort of...
Why don't you pick a good time when you have about an hour or 2 hours where we can sit down and have a talk? We'll do it online. We'll keep it as polite as it is right now, so we can get through points and explanations, and not, throwing insults at each other because you don't get it or you won't believe me. But because I feel like you're receptive to what I'm saying, whether you believe it or not, you're at least being receptive, and I appreciate that. So, thank you, Chris. Do you have? I'll go ahead and give you the last word before I address the last couple of super chats. If you'd like to give any last words to the audience and say your goodbyes, and we'll bring you back on for a future show.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, I mean, so again, look, I'm out doing my own tests. I've done Cavendish twice. I've done density test. I've done a perspective and angle test to see if I could cut something off from the bottom. So I'm out, and all those videos are on my YouTube channel. So I'm not a pro. I wouldn't be wasting my time making these videos if I were a pro. I've got other non-test videos talking about various observations people have done with pick images and videos of certain things, and I talk about them, whether it's refraction or inferior mirage and those kind of things. So no, I'm not a pro. I do believe the Earth is flat. Somebody asked me earlier if it's because I'm religious. I'm not religious. I was an atheist my whole life until flat Earth. And my opinion or my belief is if the Earth is flat, there has to be a creator, because that couldn't have happened just randomly, right? I mean, it's hard enough for me to believe that the universe as is, or our solar system and Earth happened random, quote unquote randomly, even if in the ball model. But no, it wasn't a religious thing. In fact, I didn't come to belief in a creator until after flat Earth, and that was just doing research on, call it the scientific or technical side of it. So I'm out there doing my own stuff and trying to prove it one way or another.
Well, I appreciate it, man. I appreciate the conversation. So, you're welcome to come back on in the future, and love to have you, bro. So we definitely being in Dallas and in the Dallas area, maybe we can get together and do some of these experiments together, and I can kind of give my opinion on, the methodology and whatnot, just as an observer, because
right.
I think that's a great way to get to the point, to get to the bottom of something. So thank you very much for coming on. You're more than welcome to stay through our super chats before I close it out, but if you got to go because of family matters, I totally understand that as well. All right, so let me get these last couple of super chats. All right, space comma for $2. Humble you, man, bro. You guys humble me with every time I hear that ding, because I've got it set up to where it plays my dinger when you guys super chat. So every time I hear that ding, I'm telling you, it humbles me, it humbles my heart, and it thickens my dinger up. So thank you. And then Thomas Miller, of course, follows that with $19.99. More funds for your dinger. Yes, you guys are making it grow. I'm gonna have to go get a new pair of pants tomorrow. I may have poked a hole in this one. Also, Thomas Miller, check your Patreon page. I posted a new video for comments. If you'd like to get on there and leave a comment, I would appreciate your comments on it. Blair Sadowitz. I hope I'm saying that right. If I'm not, by all means, correct me. Let's see. ISBN 031238. Oh, yeah, the book. Yeah, okay, I got you. I will look into that. I'll have to go back and look in the chats through the chat log to see which book that was, but I'll definitely look at that. I was interested when I saw the title. Wessick for $5. How do flat earthers explain their science to the blind? If globe earth measurements can be explained through Braille, just curious. That's a good question. I think it would still be able to be explained through Braille, but the physical demonstrations would be harder to do. I don't know. That's a great question. I've never thought about this argument from the perspective of a blind person. You're screwing with my head right now, Wessick. Come on now, bro. But yeah, definitely. That's a good point. How would you explain to a blind person that the earth is flat and still get the point across? I think it might even actually be easier for them to conceptualize it unless they were like artists who were already well versed with the concept of perspective with because there's artists out there who are blind who can sit there and I know it sounds weird, but I know this for a fact. There's a guy that's blind. He's never seen buildings before. It was explained the dimensions of a building. He drew it out from the perspective of where he was at, and sure enough, the lines in the front were shorter than the ones in the back, or one of the whatever it is. How you look at a building and how you see a building, it all, or maybe it's they were taller in the front than they were in the back, but it was so crazy the way he drew it without ever even seeing the building. He could conceptualize what the building would have to look like in reality, and it included lines that were shorter due to perspective. So I know that's off topic, but it's a good. Still making me think about that, Wessick. Tim Pryor, $15. But like he said before, how do we know where it's night and day? I mean, damn, Craig knew exactly about what time it was where I am. Like I said, must be a wizard. Yeah, Tim Pryor. It's the argument that's a complete argument from incredulity, and maybe he just needs to go and do some research on it and look it up. But this is actually something that flat earthers do accept. They accept that on the equinox there's a straight line terminator that runs on their flat earth from one side of the South Pole all the way to the next side of the South Pole, which is consistent with what we see on the globe earth map. If you put one edge of the flat earth map at the South Pole and the other edge at the South Pole, and the line you draw would be a line of longitude that runs from the South Pole to the North Pole all the way back down to the South Pole, and it would literally be where the sunlight stops on the face of the planet. Ben the Mite Metric. I'm learning your name. I'm starting to see that name, and I don't even have to read it anymore. An intellectually curious flat earther, an intellectually curious flurfer could debunk flat earth nonsense by spending one day carefully watching the sun's path. They are not intellectually curious in the slightest. I agree. The sun debunks flat earth on every day, not just the equinox, every day. You have to explain why people can see the sun where you shouldn't be able to see the sun. If it's a flat earth, you have to make up a special pleading explanation for as to why people who should not be able to see the sun based on their model are actually seeing the sun. And thank you, Ben the Mite Metric, for your super chat. Space, $2. Don't drop your phone or tablet on a hard surface. Yeah, that's a great $2 PSA for you from Space, definitely if you drop your phone or you want to test this out in any way, shape, or form, do it over a soft surface. You'll still get the same results. Don't do it over a hard surface. You will break your phone. Tim Pryor for $5. Damn, man, you're killing me too. You're starting to be just as bad as Ozzy. Why would you think there has to be a creator? If that's the case, then there would have to be a creator of the creator. Just saying. Yeah, I didn't get into that. That's a fallacious argument. I want to say it's a false equivalence to say that if the earth is flat, there must be someone who made it flat. No. If the earth is flat, then it could be done through natural processes as well. We just don't understand the natural processes yet. But it doesn't mean that it must be a creator. It would just mean that there needs to be, some kind of scientific explanation for that. And then finally, MA2 Fletcher Eisler. Wild man still need to draw a bigger dinger. Don't be a dick. Don't be a dick, Fletcher. My dinger's plenty big enough, even in my mankini photo, asshole. All right, guys. I think that's where we're going to end it tonight. Chris, are you still around? Okay. Looks like he probably stepped out. I want to say thank you to Chris and Fight the Flat Earth for coming on. Thank you guys for showing up. That I know most of y'all are coming from non-sec, and I do appreciate you guys sticking through not only an entire non-sec episode, but in an hour of our nonsense on my channel. But thank you very much. You guys have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you tomorrow night on Fight the Flat Earth channel. I'm Father Skeptic, and I'm out.